So you have an application, right, running inside an EKS cluster, and that application somehow needs access to an S3 bucket. How do you go about granting that application access to AWS S3? Typical answer for some of the candidates is that they will create an IAM user and then restrict the access to just the S3 bucket, and then create an IAM access keys and secret keys, and then supply those to the pod as a secret. While this might seem secure to you, it is not the recommended approach. Matter of fact, AWS itself bans us from using that kind of access. When it comes to granting access to an identity that is not a user, going by best practice, you shouldn't be granting permanent access to such an identity. You can create permanent access to a user like a human, but when it comes to service accounts like application, you shouldn't use permanent access, but rather go with temporary access. Do not say I will create IAM user. Now simply say that I will use the IROSA or the EKS pod identity. Now the IROSA simply means IAM rule for service account. In order for you to grant your pod access to an S3 bucket, first of all, you need to create a service account. Now you create the service account, then you go to your cloud provider and create an IAM rule. You copy the role ARON and then use that ARON to annotate your service account. Now, once your service account has been annotated, you cannot assign that service account to your pod. Now, once you've assigned that service account to your pod, under the hood, Kubernetes uses a projected volume to inject a token inside that pod. Now, within your pod, you have your application that need to access the S3 bucket. So your application cannot make an API call via the AWS SDK to connect to the AWS Assume Role Web Identity. Now, what happens is that once your application makes this API call, it cannot exchange this token for temporary access to your AWS account. This is how you cannot grant your application access to an S3 bucket. We also have the EKS pod identity. Now, the EKS pod identity is similar to the IRSA. However, you don't need to configure any OIDC provider. All you need to do is to create the role in your AWS account, and then you create the service account, and then you cannot create an EKS pod identity association to bind your service account to your role. And mind you, that service account must be attached to the pod that is running the application that need access to S3 bucket.